From the field to the film room to the war room, we've got you covered every step of the way as the road to the draft starts right now. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Armchair Scouts. I am your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by my co-host and fellow draft enthusiast, Dibes. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Be sure to check out his podcast, Party on Broad. Dibes, how you doing today?
Doing well, man. Excited for tomorrow. Getting ready for Penn State versus Boise State. Ready to break it down, man.
All right. We are also joined by his co-host on Party on Broad, Ryan. Give him a follow on Twitter at Philly Sports PSA. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, although I'd like to think I'm more of just Dibes' co-host, but
Hey, I gave you both co-host creds here. I mean, come on. I do notice though. I see a microphone or I see a cable of sorts running towards your microphone. Are we legitimately hooked up, or are you faking it this time?
Oh, you see the red button?
All right.
Hello.
All right. Awesome. We got him in the podcast studio. Mark is not in the podcast studio yet, but he promised he'll be in it by next week. Mark, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm looking at that beautiful thing that I promised. That's a new addition to the podcast studio. I don't want to give it away too soon. So, like I said, Chalk Talk next week. We debut the new podcast studio. But yeah, apparently we're here to talk about 4 college football playoff games. Apparently there's 3 other games. I'm only aware of one game that's happening on New Year's Day at 8:45. It's the only thing I've thought about for about a week and a half now. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Biggest game in Notre Dame history, man.
My lifetime for sure. All
right. Well, let's dive in. We're on an accelerated schedule this week because Tuesday is New Year's. And so, like, Birds of the Round Table is recording Tuesday night. We had to do this show early because the games are tomorrow night for college. And so everything, like, I feel like work life is a total disaster right now, but it's like this every year at the holidays. So here we are. Let's dive in, and we'll kick it off with that Tuesday game. Tuesday night at 7:30 Eastern, number 6. Well, I'm going to say number 6th seed, whatever. Number 6 Penn State versus number 3 Boise State. Penn State is coming off of that 38-10 win over SMU last week, and they are favored by 11 in this game. Ryan, I'll throw it to you first. What are you watching for Penn State versus Boise State?
Yeah, listen, I originally had picked the upset in Boise State and Penn State, and I am still sticking to it. Don't forget about that. But Penn State looked a little sloppy against an SMU team that I honestly thought that they should have put away early and more often. It was a very, very lopsided game, or at least it should have been. Penn State kept them in that game a little longer than should have. So I'm looking for Penn State to not only play a little bit more cleaner, attack a little bit more aggressively, and play a lot smarter. Because if they play as dumb as they played against SMU, I think Boise State will get the upset. And because Boise State seems to be fundamentally sound, they're going to run the ball down their throat. And, that's, I think, where you're going to tell, what side is going to win this game is whether or not the Boise State run game is working. So.
All right. Dibes, what about you? Ashton Genty have a chance here to power Boise State to victory. Is this going to be Penn State all the way? Talk to me about what you're expecting.
Yeah, that is the key. Absolutely. The Ashton Genty, can he do damage against that Penn State defense? He had 192 yards and 3 touchdowns earlier this season against Oregon. Boise State averages the 3rd most points in college football. And you look at this Penn State defense, they are susceptible at times. They're led by Abdul Carter, one of my favorite prospects in this draft. There he is. Keep an eye on Abdul Carter. If you're an NFL draft nerd, of course, you've heard of Abdul Carter, 11 sacks on the year. headlining a front seven that's one of the toughest units to run on in college football. Penn State held SMU to 1.6 yards per carry a week and a half ago. But it's also important to note that Oregon gashed them for 200 yards previously this season. So that is absolutely key. Most notably, taking care of the football, sustaining long, efficient drives against Penn State. Just imperative if Boise State wants a chance at winning. Boise State's defense, not as good. So for me, I think Boise State has been a really good story. And they have battled in hostile territory, Oregon, previous this season. But for me, I think it's the Boise State defense that eventually wears down against Penn State. Give me Penn State 31, Boise State 27.
All right. Mark, do you agree with the guys? Are you going with Penn State here? You're muted. Classic.
Good job by me there. I feel the same way. I think Penn State should win the game. I feel like I've started to talk myself into Boise keeping it close throughout the week. This was actually the one of the 4 playoff games that I really didn't have. Like I have a bet that I feel pretty good about in each of the other 3 games in terms of a side on the game. This is one that I just kept staring at the number 11.5, kind of bouncing back and forth. I don't know if it's wishful thinking because if Notre Dame wins against Georgia, they play the winner of this game. I'm definitely going to be rooting for Boise State on New Year's Eve. So maybe that's me talking myself in. But it would be really surprising if Boise State found a way to win this game. I know Ashton Genty's unbelievable. Nobody's been a bigger supporter of his all year than me. I think he should have won the Heisman. But it's Maddox Madsen that gives me some pause. You look down the stretch and he really started off the year hot. He was not supposed to be the quarterback coming into the year for Boise State. I'm forgetting. I think the guy's name might have been Malachi Nelson.
Nelson, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Top prospect.
Yeah, they got a big transfer from I forget where, but from a big school that transferred into Boise. Everybody assumed he'd be the starter, and Maddox Madsen beat him out. They looked really smart for Maddox Madsen beating him out early in the year. Down the stretch, it's felt like a lot of that offense is fully on Genty, or else they're not going to be moving the ball at times. So that's what scares me in this game. I do think Genty gets whatever his is. We can debate, is that 100 yards, 150, 200, whatever you want to say. I think it comes down to Boise's quarterback. And we saw last week, I think, a much better quarterback in Kevin Jennings for SMU look completely incompetent against that Penn State defense and make mistakes all over the place. So that's what I worry about with Madsen. I think this should be a close game, maybe like a 30-20 type game for Penn State, or at least one where Boise keeps it respectable. But Maddox Madsen turning the ball over a couple times would be what kind of scares me.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this question before we move on. Ashton Genty will be drafted with a top blank pick, Mark.
I'll say 7. Top 8. I'll say top 8.
I like
it.
Wow.
Brian?
Yeah, wow. I was gonna say 12, but yeah, wow, 8. Okay, I'm good with that, honestly. He's good enough.
I'm getting stuck on Bijan going 8, I think, because I really do think Genty's a better prospect than Bijan.
Yeah.
Obviously, every draft class is different, so it's hard to take how one draft class stacks up to another compared to where teams stack and what they need. But that's where I'm kind of coming up with the 8 number.
Yeah, I think in all honesty, I think he's the best running back prospect since McCaffrey.
I agree. McCaffrey or Saquon, yeah.
So.
All right. Dibes, top blank pick for Genty.
Top 10 for sure. And I think we could see 2 or 3 running backs selected in the first round this year. I think the running back class is stacked at the top, and I think it's got depth as well. The skill positions are really solid. I mean, look at this year in the NFL, 4 rookies, wide receivers, over 1,000 yards. And this is kind of becoming maybe a trend where we see the skill position guys make instant impact in the NFL. But that makes sense. He's a better prospect than Jahmyr Gibbs. What did Jahmyr Gibbs go?
12.
Yeah, so easily top 10.
Yeah. There is a certain division rival for the Eagles that needs a quarterback and just won a game that knocked themselves out of quarterback range that has made the decision to go with the top 5 running back before. So maybe Ashton Genty gets drafted by the Giants and then 5 years from now leads the Eagles to a Super Bowl. We can just repeat history. So I digress. Let's roll on here to Wednesday. We get 3 games on Wednesday. We'll start with the 1:00 game. Number 5, Texas versus number 4, Arizona State. Texas coming off a 38-24 win over Clemson. Arizona State obviously coming off the bye. Texas is favored by 13 in this one. It's the largest spread of these games. Dives, talk to me about Texas, Arizona State.
I mean, this is the best story in college football this season. Cam Scatterbu, really happy for him. The numbers he's put up for Arizona State is ridiculous. And that is the question. Can Cam Scatterbu do damage against this Texas defense, which is arguably the best in the nation? The Sun Devils, they are physical in the trenches. They want to cement a strong run game. And they've done so, especially over the last 6 games, 37 plus points per game. They average nearly 200 yards on the ground. And Cam Scatterbu is putting up some of the same numbers Christian McCaffrey put up in 2015. On the other end, Texas's defense is ridiculous. I mean, there's so many guys to mention. If you're any fan of Party on Broad, me and Ryan have talked about Anthony Hill a ton. One of the top standouts of that defense, just has a nose for the football. They also have guys like Jahdae Barron, one of the best nickel defenders in college football, period. So that's really it. I mean, there's not much else to add. It's kind of the same storyline as Penn State versus Boise State. This, Texas defense, can they slow down Cam Scatterbu? And I do want to add that Arizona State tends to win in the margins. Their offense is a well-run unit. They're not gonna outthrow you. They don't have the skill position guys like of Oregon and Penn State, not Penn State, but like Texas with Isaiah Bond. But they do have a very well-run offense, and I'm excited to see how that one turns out. For me, the game will come down to Texas's rushing attack versus the Arizona State run defense. That is the strength of Arizona State. And if they want any chance to keep this a game, I mean, I think Texas wins by pretty big in this one, probably like 2 scores, 2 touchdowns in this one. So give me Texas 34, Arizona State 20. The Cinderella story of Arizona State goes down this week.
All right. Mark, thoughts on Texas, Arizona State?
I think Texas absolutely wipes the floor with Arizona State. I think it's like 45-10. I actually see that there's a -12 out there on the market if you're a Caesars guy. So I love Texas here. It's actually my favorite bet of the college football playoff this round, maybe even so far. I really think this is going to be just an absolute whomping. I think Texas, a lot of the time this year, I have not been very high on Texas at times because we knew what the talent on the roster was. I mean, we all know the names, the draft prospects, everything you want to say. They were at the playoff last year, gave Washington a heck of a game. We're pretty close to going to the national championship last year. But because of the lack of big opponents that they had to face all year long, they kind of didn't really get that chance, besides the Georgia game, which didn't go well, at having that big win where they show who they are on a big stage. And we kind of got it against Texas A&M in the last game of the regular season, but they're still an 8-4 team. They went on the road and they were really impressive. But after Clemson went up 7-0 in that game against Texas, over the next half hour of game time, Clemson went on a 31-3, or Texas went on a 31-3 run against Clemson. And I thought while watching that, I was like, that's the Texas team that I've kind of been waiting for all year long. And as I'm sitting here now, I actually think there's a chance we're not talking about Texas enough as a potential national champion, because I really think I think Texas is going to win this game, obviously. The winner of Texas against the winner of Ohio State, Oregon, I almost think that's the national championship right there.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Ryan, did I ask you about this game already? I don't think I did. Give me your thoughts. Give me your thoughts and pick for Texas, Arizona State.
I would just like to second pretty much every single thing Mark just said. I think this game is over quickly. I don't think Arizona State, it's a nice story, blah, 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 but they are going to absolutely get hammered. And you know what's fun? What I find funny too is that I keep seeing these articles and these interviews about whether it's the coach or it's Scattaboo or whoever, or the quarterback, and they're all talking, they're all chirping, and it's like, what are you guys doing? Like, don't you know how this works? Like, so it's Texas by a million. I couldn't agree more with everything that Mark said. That Texas finally showed a little bit last weekend, or the previous weekend, of what the team I thought they were going to be all year, and this one's going to be an absolute slaughter fest.
All right, well, let's keep rolling then.
I want to add one quick note on this, just for the hell of it, so I can sound really smart. And
we can clip it, and yeah.
I do want to add that Quinn Ewers has at least one turnover in 4 straight games.
Hey! That's future Notre Dame Fighting Irishman Quinn Ewers. Let's back off. Let's back off on talking about his turnovers.
I'm saying you never know which Quinn Ewers is going to show up. So if Arizona State does hold Texas, especially on those early downs in that run game, Blue and Wisner, the Sun Devils are tied for 16th in the nation with 15 interceptions, and the Longhorns have turned the ball over 23 times this year, more than all but 8 of the 133 FBS teams. So there is a chance that Arizona State makes this a game. I'm just going to
Texas can turn the ball over 8 times, and it's not going to matter.
Off of what I just said, I just think this is worth bringing up because I think it's one of the more interesting conversations. It's almost a little like Wentz Foles-ish. There's a lot of rumors out there that Quinn Ewers has like a $4 million basically in-place deal to go to Notre Dame next year because Arch is taking over at Texas. What if Texas wins the national championship? What happens? Do they still make Quinn leave? Do they say thank you for the championship, but we promised the Manning family that Arch is starting and we're not going to go back on that? Or does Quinn say, well, I just won the Natty, I'm going to go to the NFL and see if I can be a 2nd or a 3rd round pick now? Like, I just thought it was so interesting that the people are talking about it on ESPN and Colin Cowherd. Like, it's basically like a done deal. Quinn Ewers has signed his papers basically to go to Notre Dame. They're in the playoff. Like, they're a huge favorite to get to the Final Four right now. It's such a weird world college football has landed in.
I like the pickup of Riley Leonard way more than I do Quinn Ewers. That's just my take.
It's different. I mean, Riley's so limited as a passer. Quinn, I do think Quinn is deadly accurate on short to intermediate throws, great on slants, great on outs. The issue with Quinn is the arm strength down the field and how much can he really stretch the field. Yeah.
The issue with Quinn is he can't handle pressure. And the good news for Texas, Arizona State has no pass rush. So that's he's going to be fine.
Quinn Ewers is a little Tua-ish in terms of his college game. Not as good as Tua was in college, but Tua in the pros is a little. I will say, like, Quinn Ewers' numbers last year are pretty insane if you go back and look at them, like comparatively to what he's done this year. Really, he was. He was 3,500 yards in 12 games, 22 touchdowns. There's about 600 yards down, more touchdowns, 4 more interceptions. But I think all things considered, if you look at like the quarterback transfer portal, not a lot of better options.
No.
All right, let's keep rolling then. Let's go to number 8, Ohio State versus number 1, Oregon. This is the Wednesday 5:00 game. Ohio State is coming off of a slaughter of Tennessee, 42-17, and they are favored by 2.5 points. This is the only rematch so far because Oregon beat Ohio State 32-31 earlier this season behind some egregious clock mismanagement from Ohio State. Ryan, I'll throw this one to you first. What are you looking for in this rematch? And it sounds crazy to say, but can the number 1 overall team pull off the upset?
Yeah. First and foremost, we have to talk about how disrespected Oregon is. I mean, they are the number 1 team. They are the only undefeated team, and they are the underdogs to a team that they already beat. Like, this is the weirdest thing about this whole entire slate of games. And listen, I get it. Ohio State, before the college football playoffs, heading in, I think everybody thought was a joke. With the whole Michigan thing and Ryan Day and yada, yada, yada. But listen, they looked exactly how I thought they were going to look against Tennessee, who we all picked to win, who we all thought was going to put up a better fight, and they got destroyed by Ohio State. And listen, I know, Dives, I know you hate yourself some Will Howard, but damn, he looked pretty damn good. And that whole team, front to back, offensively, defensively, JTT and Sawyer and all of those guys on the defense, they shut down a Tennessee offense that was extremely well, and they honestly got themselves right back into this thing as far as a contender for this national championship. And there's a lot of revenge going into this game. And, there's kind of a new found, team in this Ohio State team that, 2 games ago was left for dead. All it takes is 1 game. But ultimately, I still think Oregon is the better team. I still think they are the better coach team. I still think that they are going to eke out a very close win because Ohio State found, they got their swagger back. So that's all they really needed. So this game is going to be by far the best game of the week.
Yeah.
And this is going to be back and forth. This is one of those things where I'm not even going to be paying attention to anything. I'm just going to enjoy the entire thing. It's going to be back and forth. It's, one team goes up and then another team goes up and then back and forth. And it's going to be fantastic. Ultimately, I'm going to call for I'm going to go 41-38.
Wow.
Oregon.
Right.
I'm going to say high scoring slugfest. And it's going to be beautiful.
All right. Offensive shootout for Ryan. Mark, do you agree with that?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a really close game. And I was so high on Tennessee for the entire season. I'm not going to just admit that I was fully wrong and say that Tennessee was actually bad and that win wasn't impressive. I don't think that's what happened. I think Ohio State's really good. And I think we knew that already. The fact that they went into Eugene, into Oregon, and lost by 1 in a game where Will Howard slid on the 20-yard line, where if he just, gets out of bounds or whatever the case may be, stops the clock instead of anything but sliding while the clock is, hitting zeros, then maybe Ohio State wins that game. And, the entire story of this season for both of these teams is completely different. But I do think that there's something to be said about the fact that they were playing at home. It's not a neutral site. I think they were able to get back up and kind of get revenge on whatever that Michigan performance was, and show that their fans that they, weren't whatever they thought they were before that game. There is still a part of me that thinks when the going gets tough, Ryan Day gets going. And I do think Oregon is going to make this tough, and Dan Lanning is going to make this tough. I don't see a scenario where Ohio State blows Oregon out. And Ohio State has shown in these big games, in close games, Ryan Day gets outfoxed. He gets outcoached. The other guy has more up his sleeve. And if there's ever a time that I'm going to bet on a coach, it's going to be Dan Lanning over Ryan Day here. So I'm going with Oregon. I'd be lying if I said I'm that confident. How could you be that confident in betting against that Ohio State team that we just saw demolish Tennessee? I will say that game did get 21-10. Tennessee fought it back to 21-10 at halftime. There was a part of that halftime where I was like, okay, maybe we can actually get our first competitive game of the week here. That wasn't the case. Ohio State absolutely demolished the second half. I think Oregon wins really close on like a game-winning field goal or like a field goal that Ohio State misses at the end. Like I really think it's going to be some sort of dramatics and some sort of way that Ohio State loses close and Ryan Day is kind of able to save face, being like, well, we lost by 3 to the number 1 team in the country in the Rose Bowl. Don't fire me.
All right. Dibes, are you predicting the same thing? Is this going to be a shootout?
Yeah. So obviously it's going to be like 10-7. But anyway,
yeah, right.
6-3, throwback to Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, it is going to be a bloodbath, and I agree with what everyone just said. I mean, but yeah, the disrespect on Oregon's offense needs to stop. I mean, Dylan Gabriel and Tez Johnson, one of the best duos in college football. Oregon is a team that averages over 7 yards per play. Him with Tez Johnson is just a straight cheat code in the middle area of the field. Tez Johnson, last time he played Ohio State, 7 receptions for 75 yards and a touchdown. We all remember Tez Johnson going off against Penn State. Penn State is one of the top defenses in this playoff, and they had no answer for Tez Johnson in the middle area of the field. He can create separation like the best of them. Just one of the best weapons in the slot there is. You mentioned Will Howard, Ryan. That is the X factor in this game. And if Will Howard plays 80% of what we saw against Tennessee, this is going to be a great game. This is going to be a truly great game. There's Will Howard. A lot of us thought he was more of a game manager, but man, he moved the ball right down the field. The two guys I want to throw out to keep an eye on is Derek Harmon. He was my number 3 defensive tackle in this draft. I think he's a second-round pick, 6'5" guy that can play inside and out. And Jordan Birch, another really solid pass rusher. It is vital for Oregon's defense to get after Will Howard. Ohio State's defense is way better. And these two, Jordan Birch and Derek Harmon, have to have a really good game in this one. But at the end of the day, I just think Oregon wins slightly because their offense is just more consistent. It's hard. Do I go with the team that has more talent, pound for pound, or do I go with the team that's more consistent? For me, I'm going to go with my gut. I'm going to go with Dylan Gabriel and Tez Johnson. There's just way more proof that they can get it done in such a big game. But yeah, if Ohio State goes at Jeremiah Smith early and often like they did against Tennessee, I mean, Jeremiah Smith is showing he's arguably the best wide receiver in football, period. I'm ready to say that now. Jeremiah Smith is the real deal. And if they just attack him, and I don't know if Oregon has an answer for that, this could be will be a close game, and that could be another advantage towards Ohio State. So 41-38 is a really good prediction. I'll go 38-37. Oregon barely slips by.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Our preview of every important game from the quarterfinal. Oh, did I miss one? That's everything, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Marks, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, number 7 seed, take on the number 2 seed, Georgia Bulldogs, Wednesday at 7:45. Notre Dame coming off a 27-17 win over Indiana. Georgia's favored by 1 in this game. I do think it's really funny that the 1 and the 2 seed end up with harder games than the 5 and the 6 seed did, more than likely. Now, granted, they did get a bye, and so that counts for something, but definitely a tough break here for Oregon and Georgia to draw Ohio State or Notre Dame over at Arizona State or Boise State. But Mark, I'll throw to you first this time and let you homer for Notre Dame and tell us why they're going to beat Georgia. So go ahead.
Don't worry. Penn State had a bye too. They were called SMU. But yeah, the fact that Penn State and Texas have easier paths than Georgia and Oregon are obviously absurd. And it's also absurd that Penn State was ranked one spot above Notre Dame for 2 months this year, lost the Big Ten championship, and stayed in front of Notre Dame. Notre Dame could have had an SMU Boise State path to the Final Four. Instead, they had to actually earn their way to the Final Four. And here is what they call earning it. They have to play Georgia, and that could not be more earning it. The SEC champs, and do they have a backup quarterback in? Yeah, but Carson Beck played like a backup quarterback for the entirety of this season. So I don't really think that they're taking some big leap down in quarterback play. It does seem like Stockton brings a little bit more with his legs than Beck did. And also the mystery of I almost think I'd feel better if Carson Beck was fully healthy about this game, because the mystery of Gunnar Stockton and not having a lot of film to go and crunch on him. And even in that Georgia-Texas SEC championship game, they didn't really let Gunnar Stockton make a lot of big-time decisions. A lot of the things that they were doing were scripted out there for him to make it easy for him, or they were running the football or having him run the football. The one thing that makes me nervous about this game is Notre Dame not really being – Marcus Freeman, really, really good defensive coordinator, really good defensive coach. Al Golden is the real defensive coordinator, and he's doing a great job as well. But I would feel better if you had more tape to kind of prepare for from the quarterback. Having said all of that, I would say the moment that I started to feel confident about this game was before the Indiana game, when DraftKings put out their initial line for Notre Dame, Georgia, and it was Notre Dame -2.5. And that shocked me. And I think that the only reason that this line is Georgia +1 or Georgia -1 and not Georgia as an underdog is because the reaction to that look ahead line when it came out was so absurdly slanted towards Georgia. And everybody's like, how would Notre Dame be favored over the SEC champs? And I think, the number one job that sportsbooks have is to get 50% of action on both sides of a bet. That's why that Georgia's now a 1-point favorite, and it's basically sitting there at a pick 'em. And there's a lot of money pouring in on Georgia. Vegas will not push Notre Dame beyond a 1.5 point underdog. They keep them there because they don't want to put themselves at a risk for a buyback. And that's what I kind of hate analyzing football games that way. I've made fun of a lot of people at my radio station that I work at for strictly just betting with what the public's betting and all the splits and what's square, what's public. I do think that it says a lot that the SEC champs are only a 1-point favorite in the game that they're playing down south and the first game they're playing in the playoffs. I think this Notre Dame team is legit. I think Jeremiah Love showed that the first time he touched the ball and went, 98 yards, 97 yards against Indiana. And obviously the Indiana, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was all that great, but I did love how Notre Dame squashed them like a bug and never let them up for air for a full 4 quarters. So I do feel a little bit differently about the way Notre Dame won that Indiana game as opposed to Penn State against SMU, where I felt like SMU threw that game away, whereas I felt like Notre Dame squashed Indiana like a bug. I did feel like it looked a little different. It looked a little more varsity versus JV than even some of the other blowouts did in some capacity. So give me Notre Dame. And here's what I'll say. If they win this game, they will be going to the national championship.
Nice.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. Dibes, chime in on this one. Notre Dame versus Georgia. Which way are you leaning?
I mean, obviously, Georgia has some big names, led by Malachi Starks, one of the best players in the country, period. Position value be damned. He's a top 10 talent in this draft. I think he's one of the few blue chip guys in this draft. So keep an eye on Malachi Starks. Jalen Walker, edge rusher, linebacker. I think he was my number one linebacker in my rankings. Amazing pass rusher, guy that can do a lot of different things, a chess piece for that Georgia defense. But this is all about the trenches. If Georgia is going to have any chance in winning, they have to win in the trenches. I'm with Mark. I'm not a big Carson Beck guy. He's one of the few disappointments this season. He has not shown to be the guy whatsoever. There's been some flashes, but for the most part, it's been a disappointment. So Trevor Etienne and the Georgia offensive line has also been somewhat of a disappointment, whether it's injuries or not playing like they should. So I think that plays in the hands of Notre Dame, who's one of the most physical teams in the trenches in the country. So I'm Notre Dame on this one. And I originally picked Georgia. I definitely have flip-flopped to Notre Dame on this side, mostly because I didn't really get to watch them as much as I did this year. But give me Notre Dame. I think the combination of their physicality with Jeremiah Love, who we're going to be talking about for a long time. He might be one of the best Notre Dame running backs ever, which is crazy. Elite athlete. I would love to hear Mark's thoughts on Jeremiah Love, but that guy is a walking touchdown, and he's really fun to watch. So I'm flip-flopping. I'm going to stick with my Georgia pick. I just don't think Georgia's offense is going to be able to do anything against Xavier Watson, that Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, the Jeremiah Love thing is pretty interesting. I think he's got a chance to be like my favorite player in Notre Dame history, to be honest.
Wow.
I love my favorite player in Notre Dame history in my lifetime is Kyron Williams, and he's the best Notre Dame fantasy football player of my lifetime. Jeremiah Love is better as a runner than Kyron Williams was at Notre Dame. And he has, there's a reason Jeremiah Love's averaging 7.4 yards per carry this year with 16 touchdowns. He also has about 4 or 5 hurdles, just full clean jumps of people this season. And a lot of that is helped by Riley Leonard being such a good runner in his own right. I mean, we see it ourselves. But how did Saquon look in that Washington game once he took Jalen out of the game? And it's having the threat of the mobile quarterback. I've talked about this for years on Chalk Talk with Shane. The floor that a mobile quarterback brings your team is because of how much he helps the running game outside of it. So I do think that Jeremiah Love has been helped by Leonard. The one thing I am interested in this game, they've been so careful with Love's workload and his usage. Only 142 carries on the season this year. Riley Leonard almost has as many. Jadarian Price has about 100 carries. He's averaging 6.8 yards per carry, Jadarian Price. He's a really good running back as well, but Jeremiah Love has a different level of explosiveness than Jadarian Price. But you look at his carries, he only had 8 carries in that Indiana game. They pretty much apparently he had a really bad, like 102 fever coming in with the flu, and then ran that 98-yard touchdown right off the top on his first carry, which is crazy. But 8 carries, 13 carries, 7 carries, 16 carries, 9 carries, 8 carries over his last 6 games. I wonder if they'd maybe break glass in case of emergency here and bust out 20 carries for Jeremiah Love and really, really just let him tote the rock and see where that'll bring him. That's what I would do.
I remember you being devastated when Audric Estime left for the draft early. Maybe he knew something. Maybe he knew, he saw this one coming, that Jeremiah Love is the next great one.
Oh, he's way better than Estime. Yeah.
All right, Ryan, I'll throw it to you. Notre Dame, Georgia, give me your thoughts. Are you going to be the one to crush Mark's dreams?
I might. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But first, I would like to address a few things. One, Dives, if only Notre Dame was on TV more, where you could watch them. I'm just maybe if they only had like a dedicated channel, we'll have to figure that out for you so you can watch
NBC.
Yeah, watch more Notre Dame games. Also, listen, I love me some Jeremiah Love, and I do. But to say that he's the best Notre Dame running back in history is almost blasphemous, in my opinion. I mean, Jerome Bettis, Gip. I mean, the old win one for the Gipper. I mean, come on.
Kyron Williams is better than Jerome Bettis ever was right now. I'll say it. I'll give you that. Jerome Bettis had a longevity run. He was one of the best short yardage backs of all time. I don't think he was the full purpose back Kyron Williams is in the NFL.
Okay. Are we talking NFL or are we talking Notre Dame?
That's fair. I'd have to look at that's fair.
It has to be Jerome Bettis personally. But anyway, aside from that, this and we do have we have confirmation that Beck is out.
Yeah, he's out.
Oh yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought. Okay. So listen, I think when I originally picked Georgia, this was, assuming that Beck would figure himself out. Obviously, that hasn't been the case. And, the simple fact of the matter is that, there isn't a lot, at least for me, that I know about Stockton, right?
Yeah.
And listen, that might be, a good thing for Notre Dame. All right. I got it. Stockton's a sore subject in the Mark household. But yeah, I think the more I think about this game and the more that I think the rise up of Notre Dame on the second half of this season and into this playoffs, I think I might be leaning a little bit more Notre Dame now. But I keep coming back to this Georgia team where they have been a little inconsistent, but man, when they are on, they are one of the best teams in the country, especially defensively. And I think they have an answer for Love. I think they have an answer, for Riley. So this is one of those ones where I'm really up in the air, honestly. I think ultimately I will say that Georgia wins in a extremely close matchup because this way I can still say I picked Georgia originally, and I'll go with that. But man, this is going to be one of the more intriguing games, and it's all going to come down to Stockton. Is he ready for this? Is he ready to step in and lead this, Georgia offense? Who, let's be honest, isn't the Georgia offense of, even a few years ago with the star power, but still, this defense of Georgia is going to have to shut down a very solid and running on all cylinders type offense. And like I said, Notre Dame has been on such a rise in the second half of this season. It's really hard to kind of see them faltering at this point. So I don't know. I'm still going to say Georgia, but man, I don't know where to go on this one. This one has me all over the place.
All right. So I think you guys picked the same on every game except for this one. I think it was a clean sweep. So
I had to be different. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they maybe they knew what they were doing in the scheduling here, putting the two best games Wednesday later in the evening. But that's going to about do it for our quarterfinal preview show. We'll be back next week, and we'll get you guys a semifinal preview, and then of course a championship preview, and then we'll get into our draft stuff. But hope you guys have enjoyed going through this college football season with us as we close out 2024, head into 2025. Make sure you're following these guys on Twitter. Dives at Mr. Crockpot puts out lots of great college stuff all year round. So does Ryan at Philly Sports PSA. Mark and I do a little more, I think, NFL focus during the year, but get into a lot of the draft stuff as we approach January and February. So thank you guys for joining us for this episode of the Armchair Scouts, for following along with our coverage this season on the Eagles Pinpool Network feed. Make sure you're subscribed over there so you get all the shows on the feed. Check us all out on Twitter. Again, I'm at Shane Half NFL. Dibes is at Mr. Crockpot. Ryan is at Philly Sports PSA. Mark is at Mark Henry Jr. And we will catch you guys next week for another episode of the Armchair Scouts.